If we went into that conversation saying we need to win this because we need the revenue, we want the customer, the intent is different. The feeling we would have given across would have been different.
In episode 5 of How to Get Clients miniseries, the conversation shifts from outreach to qualification, knowing which deals to pursue and which ones to walk away from.
If you can't clearly talk about a problem statement before you start writing a proposal, then you should still be in qualification stage.
We feel like we need to fill up our calendars with meetings and we feel like we're being productive, but it's not always the case.
If you're in professional services and your pipeline is full, but your close rate is slow, this conversation is for you. Welcome to Revenue Leaders Podcast.
Okay, Regs, we're back. Episode 5. Another beautiful day because Luigi's not here. And just want to make another comment to that. It's been 3 episodes now without Luigi. It's probably my favorite episodes.
I think this is, a cool new studio too. Shout out to the guys at Pivotal Conversations for this because they've done an incredible job at their new place. But yeah, I think the cherry on top.
Louis not here.
Yeah.
Good. I think it might become a regular theme, I reckon. Anyway, back to episode 5. And this one, it sort of strikes a chord with me because we feel like we need to fill up our calendars with meetings and we feel like we're being productive, but it's not always the case, right? So the topic of this one here is about having the right conversations. And when do you know when you're having a conversation with a prospect, if it's one that you should be pursuing, like taken to the next stage, or when would you know it's time to call it a day and part ways? And I guess that's a hard thing to do because one, depending on, you might have a KPI of the amount of deals or calls that you're having. So again, 2 days leading indicators need to be adjusted based on the quality. It's not about the quantity, it's the quality. We're doing this right now where we know within Coach Pilot, we only need to have X amount of calls and they need to be the right calls. So it's not a volume game for us. So why do so many sort of professionals you see Rick spend so much time on calls and pushing them through, even if they know nothing's going to happen from them?
So the first thing I'd say is that there's an emotional investment in selling, right? So if you're having a conversation and someone on the other side is either indicating that they may have a problem that you could potentially solve, or they're leaning into the conversation that you're having around your product or service, there's an excitement there because we all get emotionally invested in this. What I see there is that some don't, I think there's a reluctance to say no to everything. And say if you're not as confident, for example, you're more likely to go make everything an opportunity. And then it's also around having a conversation without qualification structure as well. Yes, not every initial conversation will end up being, qualified. So having that structure there, I think, is really important. Even yesterday, we had a call and you called me and was like, "Are we preparing for this?" I'm like, "Nah." Don't worry about it. I don't think that this is an opportunity. I know our first meeting structure off by heart. So I was like, we can have that there. But I went into that discussion thinking it is not an opportunity. But then because I still had that first meeting structure, I was able to eventually realize, oh, hold on a second. This could actually lean more into qualification than no. So I think having the confidence to say no would be one. But I guess from your perspective, what should it look like for you? What should qualification look like?
Yeah, that was a good one, right? Because it was I was almost going to say, well, do you really need me there? But it was great, right? Because I think in hindsight now is that, look at all these conversations, especially the first one, as an opportunity to learn. Because we did learn some amazing things about that space. And it's hey, there's a real opportunity here, not just for this customer, but for all their lookalikes. That was because we understood the real problem. We understood that they have budget. They're just sorting through internal things and they need to push things around. But they did indicate that there was budget there for something like this because it's a problem that they need to solve. And that's a good indicator where if they are willing to push other things aside to solve this problem and they're having that conversation with us, they're looking at us as a bit of a trusted advisor and what we're offering is ticking a box for them. Then we understood as well the timeline. So they told us that we need to start selling by X time, so we need to have something implemented by Y. Great. That gives us our time frame to sort of structure this deal that we can then help lead them and say that if you need to hit that target of selling by X time, let's just call it July, then we need to have a bit of a go or no-go from you guys within the next 4 weeks, because it's going to take us 3 to 4 weeks to do X, Y, Z to have you and your team ready, onboarded and ready to rock and roll. So the timeline sort of filled itself out, right? And it was just a really good conversation where we didn't go into it with any sort of preconception of, this is going to be bad. We just didn't think it was going to be great. But what came out from it was so much more from it. It was probably one of the better conversations we've had because we just let them talk.
Yeah, ask questions, deep dive a little bit. I actually found yesterday as well, because I didn't emotionally attach to it, you can actually just slow those conversations down. It's quite I was just like, oh, this is so refreshing. If I'm not thinking, and I know that a lot of sellers do this as well, when you have that emotional attachment, you almost think of that meeting as if this meeting doesn't go well, or this meeting needs to go well so then I can close it. Whereas we just slowed it down. We're like, okay, this is one conversation that will potentially move on to the next step and then the next step. And thinking of it like that, like little chunks, I think makes a huge difference, right?
It is. And I think it comes to another thing that he who should not be named, that's not here in this podcast, says, right? It's about having a really abundant mindset where if this deal's not the right one, that's okay. Let's move to the next. And having that approach and that mindset led us to have a really good conversation, right? Where if we went into that conversation saying, we need to win this because we need the revenue, we want the customer, whatever might be the reason, the intent is different. The feeling we would have given across would have been different. And we would not have mentioned that, hey, this is not the right time.
Yeah.
Let's reconnect in, 6 or so months. Because it's usually the other way around that people say that to us, right? Or say that to when they're buying something. So having that abundant mindset, right? Even though it's just ingrained into us now because of how much we talk about it and we're all believing it, really changed the tone of that meeting.
100%.
Pardon the interruption. I'm Luigi, one of the co-hosts here at Revenue Leaders. You'll notice we don't run sponsors or ads on Revenue Leaders.
This show is free. Our goal is to help you grow revenue and build your sales system that you can rely on. We do have a favor to ask though.
If this episode gives you one clear idea that you can use, do these 2 things. First, share it with one person, a founder, a revenue leader, or a rep who wants to grow their business. Just one. That's how the show grows.
Second, grab free access to our vault over at coachpilot.com/vault. Inside, you'll get the frameworks, templates, and short courses we use with clients to help them scale pipeline and increase win rates.
So the deal is simple. If you get value, share the episode with one person and go to coachpilot.com/vault to get the tools to put this into action. All right, let's get back to it. And I think it just slowed it down to talk about the real problem. And you were talking about this before, along with budget and other things, timing. If we were to break down how to essentially find out the real problem, what are some of the, characteristics or behaviors that we need to have in those conversations that can make, that qualification process a lot easier for the seller? Like, what would you do?
So I'll say, I'll call these a bit of red flags, right? So if they can't really describe their problem, that's a red flag, because then your response is going to be just as vague back to them, and they're not going to feel that it resonates and hits because they're not really sure. That there's a clear indicator to me that they're not sure what they're looking for, right? So then I'll just go back with a question and this is another one from the Luigi playbook is, what sort of brought your attention to, join this call today? What triggered you? Because that might be something that they saw that could then lead you through to the next question.
Yeah, so that's a really good point, Dave, because red flags that I see as well, and this goes on both sides. So if you can't clearly talk about a problem statement before you start writing a proposal, then you should still be in qualification stage. And that goes, so if you're a buyer, you need to be able to clearly articulate, this is the problem that I have within my organization that I need help solving. And then from a seller side, it's like if you can't write the 2 or 3 sentences of the person you're selling to and saying, you as an organization are experiencing X because of Y, therefore you need to do number 1, 2, 3, then you still need to stay within that qualification stage. Or if there's too much back and forth and you can't get an answer, then maybe they're not ready for something either. So, it's okay at that stage to say, typically when we're walking through this process, if we understand X, Y, Z, we'll be able to move to, this next stage. If you can't articulate that, then it's time to just walk away. Continue to nurture them, continue to stay in contact, and maybe something will come up in future, but don't push an artificial solution to a problem that you can't articulate.
And then I guess the flip side to this, the green flags is that they're really clear on their problems. They understand their timeline or they have a good indication that you can help fill in. Like in that case that we spoke about, we're selling by this stage. So then we can reverse engineer what the timeline needs to look like. And we got agreements on that. There's some budget commitment where they know that, this is something that we're looking at. So they're in the active buying state. And then what happens from there is that your pipeline is smaller, not in a negative aspect, but it's higher quality.
Yeah, not overinflated.
It's not overinflated. It's not like, I've got all these deals to work through. It's like the deals that are in this pipeline are real deals. And then what, we'd recommend is have a separate pipeline, like a leads where, they're not inflating your numbers so that you're forecasting and what you believe is going to close this quarter, next quarter and whatnot is accurate. And you're really clear on your pipeline and you're confident that you're going to close these deals.
I think the last one I'd add to that as well, Dave, is like the involvement of multiple stakeholders. So what I find is if you're only talking to one person and you're inviting the opportunity to bring in additional stakeholders to understand not just from their perspective, but the perspective of others, and they don't want it, that to me is a red flag. But if you're going through and it's like, typically at this point, what we'll do is we'll bring along a few other stakeholders to this to understand from their perspective. So then we have the bigger picture. Like, would it be worthwhile us, creating the next conversation with them to discuss 1, 2, 3? And if they say yes, because it means that this is an organizational problem, not a people, like one role problem. And that's a sort of green flag where you can be like, tick, like this should be moving to the next step. And it should just be then building on that qualification to be a deeper dive. So then you're talking to the whole party, not just one person.
And look, the mind shift that professionals need to, employ into their life is that disqualifying is not losing. It's leaving room for better opportunities to come into your world and to focus on better opportunities that are currently in your pipeline. And focus improves their outcomes, right? So, Regan, if someone is listening to this and, they want to take 1 or 2 key points to implement today, what would be your top ones?
So great question. To wrap up is make sure you ask really good questions during that qualification stage. Don't confuse interest with intent. Make sure that you're understanding like the real problem. But I think from there, if you get that qualification right, then that leads us to scale, right? So that's what we're going to talk about in our next episode and final episode of this series episode 6 is how to scale your business.